Dear Thai, dear community, welcome to our fireside chat. This session is about us, our Sangha, our order, our future, a little bit of our history. When we were planning this yesterday, we were meeting in the Golden Lotus common room in these big plush white armchairs, and we were having a good conversation, and we said, why don't we have a conversation? We'll bring these white chairs over there. And T.P Vu said, well, I'll bring the tea. And then we just said, well, I think Richard said, let's have a fireplace too. So we have here 4 experienced community builders. T.P Vu has lived many years here, maybe other monasteries too, knows something about building a monastic community. Richard Brady formed one of the first and still longest lasting and largest communities of mindfulness in this country, in Washington, D.C., and has started the Mindfulness and Education Network for 14 years, something like that. And Joanne Friday has built multiple sanghas and communities in Rhode Island and along Connecticut, and probably has mentored maybe 3,000 people. I'm John Bell. I started a Sangha in the Boston area in 1997, still going strong. It's spawned several other Sanghas. And in my wider life, I've helped develop an international organization that has 350 organizations, programs in 15 countries. So we've known a little bit about organization building, leadership development, diversity, culture, things like that. So we're going to have a little conversation among us about where we are, what's important, what are some of the conditions we've found important for building a long-lasting community. And my assignment is to say a little bit about, it's snowing again. Look at this. It's the most interesting weather. Can you all hear? Raise your hand if you can't hear well. Okay. So my assignment is to set the context and a little bit of the history before we have an ongoing conversation. Most of us know this and it's available in different books and online, but just a few of the historical moments that are worth remembering. Thai entered the monastery in 1945. Wasn't it great to see Thai the other morning on the video? This is so beautiful. 1945, he was 16, I was in diapers. In 1945, he is ordained. In 1950, he co-founds his first monastery. Right out of the gate, he was on fire. He'd been influenced by the humanist Buddhist movements in China in the 1920s, which was about humanity as one and seeing the bodhisattva ideal as a way of relieving suffering, so out into the world. And he began teaching. In 1959, he had a fateful meeting with Sister Chongkong, another force of nature. They've teamed up. He talked to her about his early ideas of creating these, what he called experimental villages, where it would be doing new kinds of healthcare delivery and education and job training. And so she went and got 70 of her friends, her closest friends, and started working in the low-income areas of Saigon. In 1964, this was a big year, Thai founded Van Han University as a teaching and practice center, La Boy Press as a vehicle for getting his writings and others in his following out, and announced the founding of the School of Youth for Social Service. 1,000 young people signed up in a very short period of time. They began to work in all the low-income communities, relieving suffering, redoing the villages as they were bombed again. In 1965, Thai put out a call in Vietnam to end the war, which didn't bring him favor from the government. And in 1966, as Dennis mentioned the other night, he revised the traditional Buddhist precepts and put it together in what we now know as the 14 mindfulness trainings, adopted for the modern times. And ordained the first Sister Chong Kong and 5 other people as the first order members. And it was about them for about first 10 years. 67, I'm not going to go through every year, but just 67, he was invited to the United States to talk about the Buddhist role in the war, and where he met Martin Luther King, who he encouraged to speak out against the war, and of course Martin Luther King did in this famous speech at Riverside Church, where he talked about the 3 evils of militarism, racism, and materialism. Still true today. And Ty also he went to Washington and put out a call to the United States government to quit bombing and call for ceasefire. That made the government Vietnamese government call him a traitor, and he was no longer safe to come home. Settled in France. Sister Chong Kong joined up with him there. They started teaching. And you have a phone call coming in? Okay. 1980. Thank you. Thank you. I'll have a sip of tea. Thank you. Just a couple more on the history. 1982, Ty and the lay practitioners moved into what's now called Plum Village, kind of a ramshackle farm in the vineyard country near Bordeaux. And they continued to teach, do retreats. I met Ty in 1982 when he came to the United States, and we had a conference where he was one of the keynote speakers. And somewhere in there, they had conversations. And in 1988, this is a key year, 1988, the first monastics were ordained. Sister Chong Kong became the first monastic, followed by Sister Annabelle. Now I'm going to stop at the history at that point, because from 1988 to 2015 is only 27 years. We're a baby lineage compared to the thousands of years lineages that we have. So what have we got? Here's the current situation. And maybe these numbers are out of date, so people can correct them. There are monasteries dotting the globe. There are several institutes of applied Buddhism. There are over 400 monastics, over 600 order of interbeing members. There are now over 100 wake-up Sanghas around the world. How many here are part of wake-up Sanghas? Good, glad you're here. Keep it going. There are, I don't know how many Sanghas there are worldwide, but 1,000, I'm sure, and all over the world, and more. So it's been a very fast development, and we're at some inflection points. Ty's health makes us realize things are going to change. Impermanence rules, we know. In North America, there's been a lot of sort of beautiful organic growth that's also been inconsistent and kind of untrackable in some way. Some of the older order members here, there wasn't much mentoring. You didn't know whether you got the call or not. You'd go to the retreat hoping you were going to be ordained, but didn't know until a ceremony happened, I remember. The Dharma teacher, I got a call from An Hong saying, and I had no idea. An Hong said, "You're going to Plum Village in 2 weeks to receive the lamp." That was it. So some of the senior Dharma teachers in North America about 7 years ago, began to have phone calls about, well, could we begin to apply some structure, some kind of consistency. And they began to meet. Then they they got together and had some meetings. And then in 2010, we formed the North American Dharma Teachers Sangha. There are now 67 members of the Sangha, Canada and the United States. We meet, there's a caretaking council, which meets monthly. Brother T.P Vu and Joanne have been on it. I'm now serving a term as a 3-year term, rotating, so all the Dharma teachers over time will serve on the caretaking council. We meet once a month. And we found, so here's what's happened. Had to have some governance stuff. How do we organize ourselves? How do we rotate the in and out of leadership? Who chairs it? Do we incorporate? Then as soon as we got set up, lots of conflicts started to come. There's some place to take the complaints now. So we began to hear conflicts, right? Before it was like, who do you talk to? Now there's a bureaucracy, right? So we had to have a harmony committee to create a conflict resolution. Then we began to hear lots of stuff about OI stuff, and we don't know what's going on, and how do people, is there curriculum, is there training, are there mentors? So then we had an OI committee. I think, Joanne, you worked on that for a long time. Very good. Now, how many of you have been using the aspirancy guidelines and with your mentors? Has it been helpful generally? I know there's some detail we can learn. Okay, good. Then we began to see, well, we have to have communications among ourselves, and how do we get a list of the Sanghas and the order members and a newsletter. You can see how this is going, right? Well, now we have some basic building blocks in place. So now we're at we just had a retreat of the Caretaking Council in Magnolia Grove in Mississippi. Beautiful, beautiful meditation hall too. All the meditation halls are so beautiful. And now we're kind of turning the corner to look at outward facing. For instance, Sangha development. We have a Sangha building committee. A couple of you here, Dharma teachers, are on that committee, looking at, well, what's facilitation like? What are the issues that come up in Sangha building? Well, outgrowth of that is mental health and well-being practices committee. So we did a survey, and 83% of the Dharma teachers are reporting that the Sanghas they're associated with have had, over time, something that could be described as a mental health issue showing up in the Sangha, which messes with Sangha harmony. And we're not necessarily well trained to deal with that, either on the emotional level or on the Sangha building level. So some attention and some guidance has been called for. And we're in that process. We hope to have some booklet out by the fall. Dharma teachers, life and nourishment. How are they selected, prepared, nurtured? Once they become Dharma teachers, there's lots of issues. How do we maintain contact and support each other? What's the financial, all the dana and compensation, all those kinds of issues of people who are donating their lives, really, teaching the teachings for free. Insurance. We're now just about to have insurance for Dharma teachers, because with the brown robes and the ordination, the lamp, we're considered ministry. So in that capacity, we can be sued for misconduct, unprofessional behavior, inappropriate to the professional role as is defined in the law. So we need some protection, because it could be not just the individual, but the monastics, the buildings, the Unified Buddhist Church are vulnerable to in this litigious society that we live in. So things like that you don't think about usually when you're in the Sangha or an order of interbeing member, but there's a lot that's happening. One last thing. So in my opinion, what we're doing is, we're faced in a world that's collapsing. If you haven't noticed, we're in deep doo-doo. And increasing numbers of people are wanting refuge. in churches and congregations and meditation centers and in our Sanghas. They're coming, many of them with lots of distress from a collapsing society. And we have a fledgling, powerful, but fledgling worldwide movement, organization. And Thai, remember Thai's early roots, he's really about the Bodhisattva path. He wants us to be a strong enough container to be able to help heal the people coming in from the collapse around us and go out stronger and able to heal. So what we've been doing the last 5 or 6 years is putting in the North America. It's different probably in other areas, so I can't speak for that. But in North America, we've been putting down foundation stones, building stones. And what we're doing collectively here, think of that you're part of building something that hopefully will last for 500 years. Don't know, conditions change. It's not necessary that it lasts that long. But it could. And it could be a powerful, I think Thai would really like this to be part of the continuation, a powerful part of human evolution, that what we could add in our collective energy. So there are a lot of conditions that are necessary to make that happen. So we're just going to talk among ourselves here a little bit about what we've seen. And I'd like to ask Joanne first if you would talk about the whole area of mentoring and what you've seen is important and maybe what some of the sticky areas are.
Dear Thai, dear brothers and sisters, it's a real joy to be able to be together again. And I'm really glad we have an opportunity to talk a little bit about strengthening the community. How are we going to be doing that? How do we continue joyfully together? To me, Sangha building, community building, comes down to love. And I look at Sangha building as a wonderful opportunity. I know some of you have heard me say in the past that a big part of my practice actually is based on a Rumi quote, that Rumi said, our task is not to seek for love, but to seek and find all the barriers we've built against it in our hearts. And to me, Sangha building is a wonderful way to do that. It's a wonderfully deep practice that we're called upon to love everybody and to look deeply to find the Buddha nature in everybody. When we, years ago at Green Mountain Dharma Center, I guess it was, Sister Annabelle took me aside, and as John said, initially in our family and in our order, people were sort of just called upon to be an order member or called upon to be a teacher or whatever. And so Sister Annabelle called me aside and she said, Joanne, we need mentoring. People don't understand the practice. There are some people that don't understand the practice. And so that gave me an idea that would be a good thing to try to do. And for me, mentoring, Thai has given us everything that we need, everything. The order is called the Order of Interbeing. Inherent in the name of the order is the deepest practice we could ever be committed to, and that is to live moment to moment to moment from the awareness of our interbeing, of the fact that I am you, you are me, and your happiness is my happiness. I was very moved yesterday in the talk that Thai gave when he talked about how we are such a fiercely individualistic culture, that it would make sense that the Dharma would be translated in a way that it has been translated, in terms of using it as a tool, mindfulness as a tool to accomplish some goal. And I think that what he has done is so beautiful, because he's given us guidelines to be a collective rather than an individualistic society. And that's where true happiness is. And in my experience, that's what's been true for me. In mentoring, what I find to be the most important thing is, I know a lot of people get frustrated because the process isn't an academic one, that it's not set up with a syllabus and course requirements to accomplish and pass to the next level or whatever. And so that's very frustrating for a lot of us that are used to that kind of structure. But I have never yet mentored two people that are the same. Every single person's spiritual path is very unique to them. And so therefore I find that we need to be able to help each other. And what I see, the purpose of the mentoring process, and it requires a huge amount of courage, I want to put in right at the beginning. The purpose is for us to be able to embrace our suffering, which is huge, and then to be able to look deeply to understand it, and then to develop the practices to transform and heal it in ourselves, with the outcome being that we can then not be caught in our own suffering and be available to help. Because there's enormous suffering in the world, as John so clearly elucidated. But that, to me, that is what the purpose of that process is about. Where I find that it's kind of normal to get caught is that because we have been fiercely conditioned, and the process is about looking at our conditioning and seeing how has my conditioning developed my habit energy, and how does that color my perception of everything. I had one mentee that was having a very difficult time, and she went through a whole lot, and finally at one point she called me, she goes, I just realized that all of my perceptions are wrong. I said, yes, now we can go, now we can get somewhere. This is a good thing. But that is really, to me, the purpose of the mentoring process, so that we can really take on the Bodhisattva vow. And what I have found in my own experience is that if I haven't taken care of my own suffering, my perception is very skewed. It's very distorted. And I perceive whatever's happening with other people through that lens of my own suffering. When I have taken care of my own suffering, it's like the optometrist has just clicked in new lenses, and suddenly it's like, oh, they're suffering. I can see the other person suffering so clearly. It becomes so obvious. And then it becomes obvious what to do to help. When Thai says if we can calm our bodies and minds, we know what to do and what not to do. So to me, that is the purpose of the mentoring process. Like I said, I see some obstacles that are pretty normal to get in the way. One is if our conditioning has been such that we have been humiliated or discounted or demeaned or whatever, we have a lot of defensiveness. That's the habit that comes from that. And the habit makes us want to already know everything. It makes us very closed to learning. And so that, to me, is one of the things I like to try to address in the mentoring process, is to help somebody look deeply at what has been that conditioning. Have I developed that kind of defensiveness? And can I develop a little more courage and fearlessness so I can let down those barriers in my heart that I've built against love? To me, it's a huge honor to be invited to mentor someone. I look out here and I see all these beautiful faces and all the people that I love. It's a real It's just a privilege and an honor, and I learn so much from everybody that I mentor. I hope that they're learning something from me as well, but it certainly helps me to deepen my own practice. Those of you that are order members that have been feeling a little leery about mentoring, I hope that you consider it, because it really does help deepen our own practice. It helps strengthen our order. I think that for us to continue beautifully, we need to be able to have a clear mind and an open heart so that we can address all of those ills that John spoke about from a place of peace and clarity. Our order developed from the war. It came about from the war in Vietnam. And Thai has spent 70 years of his life looking deeply at the causes of war and found that the cause of war is the hatred, anger, and violence in our own hearts. And that we need to be able to transform and heal those things and be peace if we want to create peace on earth. I don't think it's ever been more needed than it is now. And I am deeply moved by every single one of you, your willingness to do your very best at transforming and healing so we are co-creating our reality here. We're co-creating the collective. And sometimes we feel that maybe what we're contributing isn't a whole lot. For me, it's every time I see somebody untie one little knot, I celebrate for the whole planet. It's like it's a gift to everybody on earth that we've done that. So a deep bow of gratitude to all of you.
What's left? Yeah, dear Thai, dear Sangha. In our Sanghas, as OI members and as aspirants taking leadership roles in our Sanghas, each of our Sanghas is unique. And just as the OI had its history, each of our Sanghas has its history. And some of our Sanghas started at retreats with Thai, where people met each other and went home and started a Sangha. Others are Sanghas that developed from already existing Sanghas. And I'm sure there are many other stories for how Sanghas develop. So the causes and conditions that went into the formation of the Sangha then continue into how the Sangha is, how it evolves as a Sangha. And that would include things like how is leadership provided. In some Sanghas there's a mama, or there's a papa, or there's a mama and a papa that are providing leadership, probably who started the Sangha. In others, it's a group of people who came together and are providing leadership. I think one of the important questions that Sanghas must face if they have not already faced it, is Sangha continuation. How will our Sanghas continue beautifully? Especially when there are particular people who seem to be key people. There is impermanence. So just as John described the structure of the Dharma teacher Sangha, providing for rotation of people and new people coming in, older people going out. I think there's a category of the kind of wisdom group, the group that have been the council of elders who've been around for a long time, that are there to provide advice. But they're not the administrating group. So this is an important question. Another question for Sanghas that varies tremendously is, what practices do you do as a Sangha to support your members, to support the Sangha as a whole? And some of these practices come up because of need. So, for example, beginning anew might come up as an important practice because of conflict in the Sangha. Conflict can be just between two individuals. But if you're one of the OIs in the Sangha or one of the leaders as an aspirant, you will hear about it, hopefully, or you might even be involved in it. Somebody might be having problems with how you're providing leadership. And so we have this process of beginning anew, which is a very powerful process. In Plum Village, beginning anew is done in the Sangha, in the monastic Sangha context, and Brother Papu may say something about that. You can do that in a community that is stable, where you don't have a lot of people who are new, because it's a very intimate process, and it would not work well to go into some of the later parts of it, of past the flower watering, if you have people who are there for the first time or who are not really familiar with the Sangha. So I'm just curious, how many of you are in Sanghas that do beginning anew as a Sangha practice? Would you raise your hand? So there are a few. Okay. How many of you are in Sanghas where beginning anew has been practiced to help resolve conflicts of several people in the Sangha? Okay. So this is not a common, I'm happy to see that this is happening. I'm sure that many of you who did not raise your hand have conflicts in your Sanghas. How many of you are in Sanghas that never have had a conflict? Okay. Okay, I think you two want to look deeply at your Sanghas. So this afternoon we're going to be breaking into groups to look at some of these questions, and we can share our collective experience with some of these things, and maybe bring things home to our Sangha, new practices. Another practice is shining the light. This is a very important practice in the monastic Sangha, and it's done differently in mentorship situations. And Joanne can speak to this. But one of the key points of difference is that sometimes shining the light is done as a way of helping an aspirant, a mentee, get a clearer idea of how the Sangha views his or her strengths and how the Sangha views his or her areas that could benefit from some work. And that's just part of the ongoing process of mentorship and aspirancy. In other situations, shining the light is not done until the person is seen as ready for receiving the 14 mindfulness trainings and joining the order. And it's done as a kind of a preparation for that transition. And I might just say that one of the most important things that I've heard Thai say about the order is it's easy to join the order. Now, some of you may not feel that, but he said the hard thing is to be a member of the order. That's the hard thing, because once we put on a brown jacket, people have expectations of us in terms of our wisdom, of our conduct, of our compassion, that they may not have consciously had before. And we also have more of those expectations of ourselves because we're wearing a brown jacket. And so these kinds of questions about conflict and about getting feedback from people and staying fresh. I mean, with the monastic community, it happens once a year. So if you could imagine maybe an OI group getting together once a year in your area or your region for a retreat, an OI retreat on a smaller scale, and then everybody shining the light on each other because you know each other. It could be very powerful in terms of growth. Wearing a brown jacket is the beginning of a new phase of growth. It's not the end of growth. So this afternoon, I think we're going to have a group that's going to be working in shining the light, talking about that, and about beginning anew. And there are other practices, too, that Sanghas use. That, in Washington, we brought in a Quaker practice clearness committee to help people arrive at clarity and get support from the Sangha to arrive at clarity about issues, not necessarily conflict, but they could be conflict issues. But it could be, am I ready? Should I be retiring? That's something that I've heard a few times already here at this retreat. And what is my life? What does my path look like if I retire? Or it may be about right livelihood in terms of what should I, if I'm uncomfortable doing what I'm doing, is this something that, can I get some support around kind of discernment about what to be doing in my life? So there are lots of different things that we can develop, bring to our Sangha, and the OI community listserv is a wonderful, wonderful resource, and we're constantly finding people are raising these kinds of questions, and people from other Sanghas are responding to them. And what we have to keep in mind is that the causes and conditions in each Sangha are unique. And so we have something to learn from each other, but we have to bring our own deep looking into our own Sangha to understand what is right action for our Sangha.
Yeah, how do you tell when someone's right for monastic life? Dear Tide, dear friends, I was a little hesitant on being on the panel. Can everyone hear me all right? How's this? A little better? Okay. I was a little hesitant on being on the panel because I was never a lay OI. And it's sort of, it's spring. The flowers are out and the crickets too. I love it, yeah. And, so monastic life is a bit different. It's a bit different than lay OI. But there's some aspects that we do share. Some of the practices, like was mentioned, beginning anew, which we do regularly. Yeah. And I think there should be a warning with that because you really need to learn to facilitate beginning anew, or else it can go very, very bad fast. Like a shooting star, and I know it's going a meteorite. So I suggest a lot of training and developing some experience in that type of practice. But I think it's important if we're talking about a community. How do we communicate? How do we practice? Well, one thing I would like to touch on is, how do we go forward? I understand, no place to go, nothing to do, all that. But you have to look at where you want to go. Where do we go to from here? And this is a continual question, even with the monastics. Where do we go to from here? Even though we don't always ask that, it's back there because as monastics, our community is always changing and growing and then ungrowing and then growing and then ungrowing. It's all just as the seeds of the mind are constantly acting, constantly in motion. So too is the Sangha body. And that speaks to us individually as well. One, where do I want to go to from here in my own practice and my own spiritual development to my relationship in the community and what I want for the community. When we're talking about growth and how we want to grow, one really needs to have an aspiration. We have an aspiration for my life. I have an aspiration about the path I want to take. We also have to have an aspiration about what we want for the community. A lot of my aspiration is surrounding, the Dharma in the West, Western monasticism, growing monastic culture. And that is very challenging. It's very challenging. What's also is important about aspirations is the aspiration of the community itself. I can have an aspiration for something like this, for having Western monasticism culture, and developing the monastic community. But it doesn't go very far if there's no aspiration in the community. Because with aspiration, there's also inspiration. Okay, and with that, there's volition, or will. What direction do we want to go? And that's very important to look at. Because if the community doesn't have that aspiration to go into a direction, one individual isn't enough in the community. Yeah, that's a big lesson I've learned over the past 2 years, being in the community and having my own aspiration and direction. And sometimes that individual is mismatched with the community. Yeah. I'm ready to go, but not so much everyone else. So, and that again is a practice, you know, because if you have that deep aspiration and the community isn't going in that direction, there's a conflict. You know, there's an inner conflict. Well, why not? You know, it should be. You know, the should word. Yeah. And so that's a type of practice. And it's a very challenging practice because you deal with everything from doubt to dismay to despair to, well, why am I doing this? You know? So it's a very challenging thing. So I think, as I said, and it's important to come, if you come into the monastic gate, you come to the monastic gate and knock, you have to have that aspiration because you won't last long. And I've noticed this. People who don't have a strong aspiration and who just kind of go with the flow, they tend to go with the flow out the gate. A lot more than in the gate. Yeah. So it's an important, and I try to instill this in the younger monastics. Here we have a very young demographics. We have 20-somethings, you know. And getting into a little mentoring, they're not only learning how to be a monastic, but they're also learning to be an adult. Yeah. I remember what it was at 20, and I'm glad I'm not 20. And so, am I training them? Am I mentoring them to be a monastic and follow the monastic code, you know? Or am I helping them develop as a human being? Yeah, develop as a human being. I think that perspective is a lot more helpful because it's really about one's spiritual growth and not being in a club or an organization, even though the organization is there for a structure, which you have to have. You know, so am I, one young brother who's a novice came up to me and said, you know, Brother Vu, I don't have to be a monastic. I don't have to be a monk. And I was so happy when he said that. Not because I wanted him to leave, but because he finally understood in a way what freedom is. Okay. We can come into the community and I have to be a monk to be happy. I have to be a monk to do well in life and to be whole. Well, monastic life isn't the most important thing. And I'm going to jump off the cliff here and say the OI isn't the most important thing. You know, the monastery is not the most important thing. The most important thing is what's going on in here. And the community needs to have that type of focus and that placement of that individual's cultivation. Yeah. So I think that's it for me for now. Thank you.
I'm responding to what Brother shared about change and visions for change and implementing change. And of course, change happens at the Sangha level, and it also happens at the individual level. And the idea of ripeness, which is a very important part of mentoring, applies not only to the individual, but it also applies to the Sangha, in terms of Sangha being ripe to make the next step or not. If you're in, how many of you are in Sanghas that have made significant changes during the time that you've been there in terms of their organization or their sense of who they were? Okay, so, and maybe we all need to be doing that, working on that in order to stay fresh. But those kinds of changes, I know from my experience in Washington, are not easy changes to make. We went from a very informal Sangha and became a 501c3 with a set of bylaws and a set of articles of incorporation. And we had people who left because they didn't want to be involved in the process, and others who left because they didn't like the way the process was happening and what was coming out of it. So I want to recommend a book, and it's the best book I've ever read on leadership. It's called Leadership Without Easy Answers. And it's by Heifetz, who teaches at Kennedy School of Government, Ron Heifetz. And it's about leadership in situations where people need to change. You don't just bring in more money or more resources in order for the change to happen. People actually have to change. And that could be one person. It could be a mentee. And he makes a very strong point of saying people are not going to change unless they are ripe for change. Sanghas are not going to change unless they are ripe to change. So as a person who's a change agent, a leader, a mentor, if the group or the individual is not ripe for change, then our job is not to make that change happen. Our job is to help that person become ripe, or that Sangha. And the wonderful thing about this book is it shows on the very large levels and much smaller levels what that process of ripening looks like. And it's an exciting book.
I've been thinking about change quite a bit in terms of the Sangha and community. And, I get quite often, and I think many of us do, about, okay, what happens when Thai passes? That inevitability. Right? My concern isn't that the monastic community is going to change. My concern that the monastic community isn't going to change. That's my biggest concern. And if you don't change, if something doesn't transform, it's going to die. Yeah. And I think it's the same is true with the lay OI. Yeah. Thank you.
Could we have a bell? Dear friends, I just had a couple things to add. One is when we talk about ripeness and about mentoring, I think that that's something that's kind of it's a good indicator, really, if somebody is ripe, because I can tell you some of the folks that I've mentored that have had the most difficult time are the ones that look perfect. That they come for mentoring, they're beautiful meditators, they sit beautifully, they walk beautifully, they know all about the Buddha's teachings, very, very bright, and they are terrified of touching their own suffering. That they use the practice as a way to not do that. And that is a real obstacle on the path. So I just wanted to add that that's not what our practice is about. It's lovely to be a good meditator, and it's lovely to be able to walk beautifully. But it's really about having the courage to embrace our suffering. The first noble truth, absolutely essential to get to the fourth. So I just wanted to add that I've had a couple experiences with people who have so many gifts to offer, but they're terrified and sometimes drop out of the aspirant process. They're not ready for ordination and get angry because they're not ripe. And they'll get angry and leave the Sangha. To me, that's a really good indication they're not ripe. Because that's not the point. So I just wanted to add that. And also, Richard alluded to shining the light. And I had written up a thing about shining the light that I think I've sent to a number of people because there were instances where things really went off the rails for people that didn't understand that practice. And it's a very, very important practice. It's what I always suggest is that we send around to anybody who's going to be participating, we send them an outline or a handout about the process and ask them to spend a month focused on this person and their practice and look deeply at the strengths in the practice and the places that could use strengthening. And if while they're doing that, they bump into little kernels of resentment or anger toward that person, they need to be beginning anew. They don't need to shine the light. And also to pay attention to the things they're offering. And is it a projection? Is it, I'm seeing in this person a difficulty, when in fact what I'm seeing is the difficulty I have with myself. It's a wonderful practice to shine light and do it skillfully. So I always offer this to people that are going to be shining the light, and the person who's having the light shown to spend that same month looking deeply at what are the strengths in my practice, where would I like to be stronger. My experience with shining light, when it's done well with plenty of preparation and everybody having a deep understanding of what exactly they're doing, it is completely out of love. That it's loving a person enough to take the time to look deeply, and it's offered, every single thing that's offered is offered not wanting them to suffer. That I've seen the practice, I've seen places where you constantly are getting caught, and perhaps this practice could help you. It's offered purely to help and out of love. If it's not, people shouldn't be shining the light. And in my experience, every time we've done shining the light, the person winds up feeling deeply loved. Sometimes they're in tears saying they've never felt so loved because they're being offered help without any criticism or judgment. And I think a lot of us are used to experiencing that instead. So I just wanted to add that about shining the light.
Some of the things you were saying makes me think, how many of you are Sangha facilitators? Wow, okay. So this is one of the hardest jobs in the world. when you think about it, and what an opportunity to practice. Because people who know me, I often say, if it's out there, it's in here. So it's true in your organizations, maybe in your families, but it's true in our sanghas too. Issues of, well, who gets to say? Who's in charge? Governance, diversity issues, male, female, race, culture, age, appropriateness, all kinds of those cross-cutting things which have been used to divide us, to separate us. All are ways that we feel not what's the word? Separate non-entities from the song, from the new chant. We're seeped in that. And so sometimes as Sangha facilitators, we doubt our own self, or maybe I'm too rigid. I want forms and somebody else wants loose. Somebody wants democratic decision-making, somebody wants a tight caretaking council. Somebody gets mad at me, and I don't like that, because all this, right? I mean, this is a... if you're not growing, you're dead as a Sangha facilitator, right? I mean, you're just numb, or just about. So I guess the if we could look at this as a great opportunity to grow ourselves, and the only way that we can keep fresh, and it's not going to change. Just the monastic practice is going to change. The whole movement's going to change. Our first, not to get stuck in perceptions and cling to old ideas. Look at what's happening. What's the truth of this reality now? But it's not easy to discern all the time, is it? I mean, it's not. I stumbled through half my life trying to find out what's the right thing to do. And that's part of the practice also. So just welcome to a big, great brew. We're all trying to help each other through this. And it will stumble. We're going to have sanghas that break apart because we don't have the skill or the capacity to hold all the different tensions that come up. That's just reality. It doesn't mean it's self-blame. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to grow, as they say. Painful. This afternoon, we'll come back in at 3:30, I think. 3:30. 3:30 to 5 this afternoon schedule. And we'll have 4 different subsections set up. One for Dharma facilitation, one for mentoring and ripeness, one for beginning anew, and one for shining the light. And when you came in and registered, you signed up for something. We'd like you to honor those. It may not be your first choice, but they're all roughly equal, so we can have kind of maximum participation instead of having one group have 70 and the other 2 have 10 each. So you know what I mean. That's the first half of the afternoon. The second half of the afternoon, we're breaking into aspirants who will gather together in the Brothers Dining Hall right over here, if you haven't been here before. And the OI members will stay here. We'll just have 2 separate discussions about whatever's on your mind about the order. Okay. We have a couple of minutes for any questions or comments before we'll sit and close for the morning. And our apologies again to the French translators. We talk too fast.
We recently took on practicing beginning anew, not as an entire Sangha, but with our aspirant, OI aspirant and OI member aspirants and long-term practitioners. And we had been advised not to do it, but we had a teacher who kind of shifted our thinking on it. And what he said that beginning anew is not a conflict resolution method. And I know that because when people have pulled that out for conflict resolution, it doesn't work. But he says it's a way that you maintain a relationship. And the way I say it, it's an act of love. You go to somebody and say, I value you enough, or I value this community enough that I want to practice beginning anew on a regular basis so that we can keep our consciousness and we can keep clarity between ourselves and a clear flow of communication and deal with anything that causes blockages in our communication. So we've only done it once. It was beautiful. And our intention is to do it maybe 3 times a year, usually after maybe we've worked together on a major event. But I really felt moved to share that because I hear of it as a conflict resolution technique a lot, and it makes people afraid of it. But when you think of it as an act of love, it becomes something that we were actually very joyful and delighted to perform. It was a wonderful process. Thank you.
Dear friends, thank you for your attention. Thank you for, it wasn't exactly a conversation, but it was good. We're going to have some announcements or after the bell.